Alright, hey guys, welcome to the origin story of Lil Nabby, Nutwad and Grulzie.
This is a true story.
There you go. So that is proof that this is not a lie and that I'm telling the truth for everything in this story that I talk about. Where to start? Might as well start at the beginning, hey? So, what happened was their mother was 87 when she had them. They were all triplets, but Lil Nabby had a different father, and he didn't know this at the time. His mother knew, and the person who looked after them, Nutwad and Grulzie's father, he knew. But that was all. They were the only people who knew. So, obviously, they didn't want to tell the kids. So they didn't, and they grew up believing that they were triplets. But something was special. They were all born on the 31st of July, 2004, at exactly 6:05. And that was the exact time that a blue moon was happening, which is, I'm guessing, why they were able to be from different parents, even though they were triplets. It's pretty cool, honestly, if you ask me. But, I'm just Lil Nabby's manager. What am I going to say? How does anything happen with me? Anyway. So, they were born, right? And then, they had a few normal years of being children, But then when they turned 4, their father was diagnosed with testicular cancer, and he passed away. And this left their mother, who at this stage was 91, to look after them alone. And she was quite old, so the children had to help out quite a lot. And they learned a lot of skills from this and were able to help their mother. But they, she was struggling, so she had to send them to kindergarten, which, it's quite hard and quite a big ask for kids when they're that age to go to kindergarten, and they had to go themselves. They couldn't their mum couldn't drive them. She'd lost her license, She'd got into quite a big car crash, but, that's another story. But yeah, so they went to kinder like normal kids, and then prep they went as well. And when they were in prep, they started having to go to the shops and doing the shopping for their mother and, helping cook tea. So they were pretty smart for the kids of their age, being only 6. But yeah, so they got to prep. They went through prep without a hitch. Everything was fine. They were all pretty smart too. Then they got to grade 1. They were about 7 at this point, and their mother decided to take them down to the park. So they all went out, Nutwad and Grulzie and Lil Nabby, pushing her wheelchair along. Anyway, it's quite a sad story, So they got to the park and they were just playing on the playground. And then a random stranger came up, and he said he looked at them and he's like, in his head, he says, "Ugh, all these kids are quite ugly. What the hell? How is one of them mine?" Plot twist. So, this was Lil Nabby's actual father. But he saw one of the kids was a little less ugly than the others. And so, he went over and he picked him up and he took Nutwad away from them. He thought that Nutwad was his kid, but he wasn't. And so, and the mother couldn't do anything to stop him because she was 90. She was in her 90s. She was quite old. So, Nutwad was gone, and Grulzie and Lil Nabby, they went to their mother, crying and asking about what had just happened. And when she told them the truth about how Lil Nabby was somebody else's son and not their father's son, Lil Nabby was very sad, but also understanding, surprisingly understanding for a kid of that age. And Grulzie just looked at him and comforted him, because he knew that there was nothing they could do to help this. And he was sad as well. He was quite sad as well. But what was done was done. And so for the next few years, they helped their mother out. Again, they learnt to shop, they learnt to cook. And then when they were 10, their mother passed away. It was quite sad, honestly, because yes, she was at that stage 97, but she was really old. But she was healthy. They'd all grown up. She'd raised them as vegetarians, and so she was very healthy for her age, and very fit, but not fit either, because wheelchair and stuff. She could only exercise her arms, but she had fun, and they knew her time had come, so they weren't overly sad. But they were thrown out onto the streets, and because she didn't have a lot of money, she didn't have anything to leave them. So they were sent to the streets to look after each other. And that was when they met the big crime boss of Australia at the time, who had them start dealing cocaine and crack and everything. And they made their money. They made what they had to do. And then when they were 11, Grulzie turned to Lil Nabby and said, "You know what? I'm going to become the king of Melbourne." And Lil Nabby turned to him and he was like, "I'm going to help you." And so they set out, and by the age of 12, Grulzie had risen up through the ranks and become the king of Melbourne. For a 12-year-old, that's pretty decent of a job. Pretty good. And then he's like, "That's not good enough for me. I have to go to the top. I'm going to become the king of crack." And Lil Nabby he looked at him and he was a little surprised, He thought, is that possible? Can you do it? And so they set out, and they found the king of crack at the time. He was a bit of a crackhead, no surprise there. And they started talking, and they connected on an emotional level. His father had also left him, but the only difference was his father was addicted to meth, and so he'd become the king of crack to try and find his father again. But he couldn't, and that was when Grulzie said to him, now these are the exact quote, he said, "You know what? If you let me become the king of crack, I'll take over your position. I'll give you all the resources you need so that you can go and find your father." And the other guy said, the king of crack at the time said, "No, I'm not going to do that." And that is when Grulzie hired an actor to go in and act as this kid's father. Though you can't really call him a kid, he was like 30, but still. So he hired a 60-year-old man to come in and, tell him he was his father. He wasn't, but the guy believed him. And so he said his life was fulfilled. He said to Grulzie, "You know what? Here's the keys to the throne. Here's my crown. Here's all my crack. Here's the code to the safe. Do it. Take over." And Grulzie was happy with that. He did. He took over, and Lil Nabby was by his side. It was fun times for them, I think. It was pretty good. And then things happened. Life went on for about a year. And then Grulzie turned to Lil Nabby one day and said, "We should go to school. We should go to high school, meet new people, and see how things go." And so Lil Nabby was like, "That sounds fun. let's do it. And so they did. They enrolled to school. At this point, they'd been given new names. Well, not new names, new last names. So, Lil Nabby was Lil Nabby Jonathan, and Grulzie was Grulzie Bernard. This way, the school wouldn't know that they were related in any way, so they wouldn't treat them like as brothers, and they might be put in the same class and stuff, because that's how they thought school worked. But they weren't. Grulzie was put in a class of students that did all Italian, whereas Lil Nabby was put into a new class with everyone. New people that wanted to learn Italian, people who wanted to learn Mandarin, people who wanted to learn Greek. And he made friends with two kids. One was called Shaki, which you know of, and one was called Chubby. And Chubby wanted to learn Greek because he came from Greek heritage and Greek background, but didn't speak the language. And Shaki just wanted to learn Italian, and Lil Nabby was like, I kind of want to learn Mandarin. And so they went to school. But the thing is, Shaki and Chubby did not like Grulzie, and Lil Nabby told Grulzie this. But Grulzie said, no, stay friends with them. They don't know we're brothers. They don't know we know each other. Just, keep up to date. Make sure they don't do anything too bad. And so Lil Nabby did that. He became great friends with them, to the point where it wasn't even just to pretend anymore. He's a pretty good kid, that Grulzie, and that Lil Nabby. Anyway, so they went to school, and about a year and a half passed. When they got to the age of 15, they heard about a new kid. And at this point, Grulzie and Lil Nabby were in the same class for English. And, they had fun. They did sit together sometimes, and they pretended to get to know each other like they didn't already know each other. And Shaki and Chubby were, fooled. And so, at this point, Grulzie was still the king of crack and still the king of Melbourne, and he ran everything. And, no one knew this. Only Lil Nabby knew. It was pretty cool, pretty cool. Interesting. Like, you wouldn't have expected him to. But this day, there was a new kid, and they were told the name of the new kid so that they could get to know him. And his name was Nutwad. And Grulzie looked up, and Lil Nabby looked up, and they just sort of stared at each other, and they knew who it was going to be. And they were excited to meet their brother for the first time in over 7 years. They didn't really know how to act. Man, it's quite emotional. But anyway, so they came to school the next day, really excited to meet their brother for the first time in years. And they were ready, but they got to English and there was no one new. And this happened on repeat for the next week and a half. He just didn't turn up. But then, when they'd lost all hope, they came to school and saw luscious locks of Nutwad's hair, and they knew instantly who it was. They went over to say hi, and he looked up at them with anger in his eyes. He was annoyed at them. His father had told him everything about how he was the child that was not his, that was not their twin or their triplet, that he was this guy's son, and he was annoyed at their mother for not telling him this. And when Lil Nabby told him that he was the one that was not one of the twins, he was annoyed at Lil Nabby, because he was annoyed that he'd been separated from his twin and that he couldn't be put with Grulzie for the first few years of his life, the years that made him who he was. And he said how his father, or Lil Nabby's father, abused him and abused alcohol and abused drugs, and how he brought alcohol from and he brought drugs from the King of Melbourne, but no one knew what the King of Melbourne's name was at this point. So he didn't know that it was Grulzie. And yeah, so they were all sad. And then he started ignoring them. He just ignored Lil Nabby and ignored Grulzie for the next 2 years. And then, they turned 17 and things started to change, For one, they all had deeper voices. Grulzie had better teeth. Lil Nabby had considerably better teeth and much better looks. And, they'd all grown shapes into their face. They weren't chubby, like Chubby. And Lil Nabby was still friends with Chabby and Shacky, who still disliked Grulzie and were semi-friends with Nutwad. But then Nutwad did something. He exposed Grulzie and Lil Nabby for being brothers. And Shacky and Chubby got really annoyed. Like really, really annoyed at Lil Nabby. And they stopped talking to him. And then in August, beginning of August, something changed. Grulzie turned to Lil Nabby and said, "I want to become a genius, a musical genius." And Lil Nabby, who at first was a bit like, he wasn't sure how to feel, but he was, happy for him, because Grulzie had only been passionate about taking over and ruling people for as long as he could remember. And so he made a song. And on the 25th of August, 2021, he released Chill and Relax. And it went down a treat. Everyone loved it. Except for one person. Nutwad, who 3 days later, on August 28th, 2021, released Grulzie diss track. And this started everything. He dissed Grulzie as if they weren't brothers. It was honestly barbaric. It was sad. I don't understand how or why he did it. But then Grulzie released a comeback called Nutwad diss track. And he told Lil Nabby, "You know what? You should make one as well." So Lil Nabby made Nutwad Sucks. And they both hit a spot with Nutwad, and who made the murder tape, The Response. And he dissed both Grulzie and Lil Nabby. But then Grulzie released a banger called The End of Nutwad Freestyle. And he talked about both Lil Nabby and Grulzie. No, both Lil Nabby and Nutwad. And that hit a spot with Lil Nabby, because he thought that Grulzie was his brother and that he loved him and didn't expect him to be called out, to call him out. And so he created Retaliation, which was a bit iffy. And then the next day, on August 29th, 2021, Nutwad and Grulzie settled the beef. Something no one saw coming at all. Not even Lil Nabby saw it, right? It was unreal. They released Reunited, Nutwad x Grulzie. And this saw the reunization of the twins. And they were honestly happy. And, Lil Nabby couldn't accept this. So, he called on his friends. He called on his friends, Chubby and Shaky, to create new songs with him and dissing both Nutwad and Grulzie. And so he, on that same day, he released a song called Lil Nabby x Chubby Fire. And in this song, he used a beat that Lil Wog had created. And, everyone saw it and, they were a bit, it could be better, but it's the best he's released so far. He's got mic quality now, because in the past, in his other two, he had used a very crappy microphone, and, it showed. It was very bad. But in this one, he'd got a new mic. It was good. And he had the feature as well, which was another good thing. It was pretty cool. And then, the same day, August 29th, Shaky released his hit song, Grulzie the Gimp diss track. Shaky x Lil Ballbag x Cousin Abdul x Lil Hedgie x Ukulele and x Iggs. And Iggs later changed his name to Doc, but, it fit at the time. And that was pretty good. A lot of features, could be better, but it worked out for him. He got the most views on any of the diss tracks, and, it hit a spot with people. But, again, there's always a comeback. Though this time, Grulzie and Nutwad had got someone else to do the comeback. They got the Clout Chasers, who no one had heard of before. It featured Lil Louie, Bungie 2 Trappy, and H Driller. And no one had heard these people before. And, they could have been better. Could have been a lot better. But it was alright. Oh well. And so they talked it out. And they tried making a song. They were very much Clout Chasers, because no one had heard them before, and, leeching off of Grulzie's fame, much like Lil Nabby did, and also Nutwad did, but, it could have been better, but it was alright. But then, on August 31st, a masterpiece was released, and it's had the least views out of most of the diss tracks, and it was called Claire de Sun. It was a masterpiece. It was a whole new direction for the diss tracks, right? Nutwad and Grulzie together had made this choir-like song, an orchestra almost, and it was lovely. It was beautiful, and it symbolized all the hardships that they had been through, and all the hardships to come, and how Lil Nabby, he will always be their brother, but also they don't want to stop the beef because they love it. It was just beautiful, and you can't top it. But then, after they released Claire de Sun, this guy Doobie, Lil Doobie, came in. He was irrelevant, but, he didn't take sides. He dissed on both sides, trying to create his own party. He's failed so far, but, he tried. It was worth it, I guess. And then Lil Nabby released Change, which was pretty bad, and he reused a lot of lines in a song he released earlier, the night before, called Love, but later deleted. And it was a slam poetry thing, and that was different. I don't think he understood how to do slam poetry, but that's alright. And then Lil Ballbag released a song called New Direction, and it honestly was not a new direction at all. It was the exact same as everything else. Then HD Rilla released a single about the death of Lil Nabby, which was, it was pretty good actually, but seemed better. And then Grulzie and Nutwad released Rest and Love. This was the same day as Claire de Sun. It was pretty cool. It was a country song, and I'll quote one of the words: Dan ran away with a gay man. It was a hit single. It was a classic, People will look back on that and be like, it's pretty cool. And at the time I'm recording this, it has the exact same amount of views as Claire de Sun, which is pretty cool. And then Shaki released another song called Shaki and Doc and Ukulele and Lil Nabby, and we called it Ending This Now, and that was interesting. It was different. It could have been better, but it was cool. And then Lil Doobie released another song, I'm in Charge, Fuck Pope, Cone Stealer, Lil Louie. Yeah, it was a bit weird, but Lil Doobie's weird, so it made sense. And then Lil Nabby released another song, and it featured the Penis Inspector, and it was on HD Rilla, or H Driller as he likes to be called. And yeah, that was different. It was not his best, but they were getting to the end, and it was pretty cool. It was different. And then the amazingest thing of amazingness happened, right? The Grulwad podcast. Grulzie made a podcast with Nutwad, and guess who? They got one of the clout chasers, Lil Louie, to help, and so they hired their managers to host this podcast. Grulzie had Zach, Lil Louie had Lewis. Don't know how they have such similar names. It's cool. And Nutwad had Anton, and so they stole it. They stole the show, They had a podcast now. It was pretty cool. They reviewed diss tracks. Their first one was on Ending This Now. It was cool. And then, what happened next? Then Lil Nabby, he also released a song where he dissed himself. No one expected it. It was different. Don't know why he did it. But, no one liked it as well. He only got critical reviews, no good reviews. But who knows? Anyway. But then, that night, Anton, Nutwad's manager, stated in a message on the official Grulzie group chat that on Thursday, the 2nd of September 2021, at 10:47 p.m, he announced that there was a new channel called Grulwad where the podcasts would be posted. And so, the first podcast, before that, they'd released a second podcast that featured me, Corban, as the manager of Lil Nabby, where we reviewed my Lil Nabby's diss track on HD Rilla, and it was different. It was cool, Yes, they threw a lot of fire at me, but that's all right. And then, but yeah, they made this new channel, and it started a new chapter, And so that's where we are today, we've come a long way. And here's Lil Nabby. Yeah. It's sad, Grulzie is my brother. And Nutwad, although we spent more than half of our lives apart, we are still brothers, We still were in the same womb together. Just because you and Grulzie are biologically twins, I'm still your biological brother. I just had a different father. I still grew up at the same rate inside of our mother. I came out between you two. That's pretty cool. But you were taken away from us. It's sad, My father was a dickhead. He taught you wrong, Sorry, he's Corban again. Yeah, wow. Thanks, Lil Nabby. You've got me in tears now too. Anyway, now that we know the true story of Lil Nabby, of Grulzie, and of Nutwad, well, I think that's where we should end this take, The rivalry is still going on. Lil Nabby still is yet to make up with Nutwad and Grulzie. It's quite sad, But we know they will eventually get back together, and I will release another song, another music video, maybe. Or, well, Lil Nabby might. I won't. I can't sing. But, I'll release another story. That's what I'll do. I'll do another audiobook, Another audio story telling you about Lil Nabby and Grulzie and Nutwad. And the reunionization of all three of them as brothers, as triplets. And it'll be beautiful. It might not be as long as this one, but yeah. So thank you for listening. All my whole story is fact checked with Grulzie, as you can tell from the start, and how he mentioned that this is all a true story. And Lil Nabby helped as well. I couldn't get Nutwad. I wanted to keep this a surprise for Nutwad, so I couldn't get his side of the story, which is why we don't have anything around Nutwad's life in those 7 years. He might release a story about that. Or he can tell me about it, and I will release another story like this about the missing years of Nutwad. But yeah, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.